So who exactly benefits from the Black Lives Matter movement? It certainly isn't the families left to grieve the 38 children who have been slain in Chicago alone this year, which even includes babies, according to 5 Chicago News. And it also hasn't supported the large amount of Black-owned businesses that were destroyed during the protests for Black Lives. The Hustle shared just 3 of the many entrepreneur stories whose businesses were damaged during the chaos. Now, these were already businesses that managed to survive through the economic lockdown measures enforced as a response to COVID-19. According to Washington Post, Black businesses were already struggling 40% more than others due to restrictions. Now, according to one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, the primary purpose of Black Lives Matter is, in fact, a matter of politics.
What we are going to push for is a move to get Trump out, while we're also going to continue to push and pressure Vice President Joe Biden around his policies and relationship to policing and criminalization. That's going to be important, but our goal is to get Trump out.
Ah, I see. The primary goal of Black Lives Matter's movement is to get Trump out. Makes sense. Even though racism existed before President Trump. Now, this really does broaden the types of groups and individuals that might benefit from the success of the Black Lives Matter movement, doesn't it? Maybe even governments who wish to exert their power and dominance over the world, like the Chinese Communist Party, would find some solace in the demise of the U.S. economy and civil unrest of its people. After all, it wouldn't be the first time civil unrest stemmed from racial inequalities was partly being manipulated to benefit a group who wanted something more out of America, something that has absolutely nothing to do with Black lives being protected. I'm going to show you a quick clip from the channel Civil Rights and Communism. In the clip, you'll hear from Julia Brown, who was a member of the Communist Party and an undercover FBI agent during the civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King. Now, I doubt you'll learn about this piece of history during Black History Month, and that's because Brown claims that the communist plan was to bring violent revolution to America during the 1950s and 1960s civil rights movement. Take a look.
It was to be a communist revolution. But the great majority of the American people would not be allowed to realize that until it had already happened. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence has something to do with civil rights. Our enemies were quick to find our weakest point for their attack. They knew that racial differences could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people. To keep hammering on that wedge, to drive it deeper into our social structure. Having been on the inside of the Communist Party, it's easy for me to recognize this revolutionary agitation in disguise. But the average American finds it's hard to believe that something as worthy and noble sounding as a civil rights movement could possibly be a communist maneuver.
Interesting, right? It makes you think just a little bit harder, especially when an organization that is extremely loyal to and has deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party has actually teamed up with Black Lives Matter co-founder. For those of you who have signed up on our newsletters or for our newsletters at rebelnews.com, you may have already read a report that we gave you bringing attention to this peculiar relationship. I want to expand a bit upon that article and highlight just how little sense this union makes from a we care about Black lives standpoint. The self-proclaimed Marxist Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza also owns the Black Futures Lab project. A primary goal of the Black Future Lab works is to transform Black communities into constituencies that wield independent Black political power at the municipal, state, and federal level. To help do so, the organization has partnered with 15 Black-led grassroots organizations in 9 states to register 10,000 new Black voters and get 50,000 people to pledge to vote. They call it Black to the Ballot. That's great, right? It's catchy, and I think everybody should vote. However, I do question what the encouragement to vote from organizations run by co-founders of Black Lives Matter who would like or say in their own words that their main goal is to get Trump out. Yet all would be lost for the Black Future Lab if not for the Chinese Progressive Association, CPA. Right above the option to donate to the organization reads, Black Futures Lab is a fiscally sponsored project of the Chinese Progressive Association. As we pointed out in our article, donations to the Black Futures Lab don't go directly to the foundation itself. The Chinese Progressive Association gets them instead. Maybe you have heard of the CPA before. According to the Heritage Foundation, the CPA began as a leftist pro-People's Republic of China organization promoting awareness of mainland China's revolutionary thought and workers' rights dedicated to self-determination, community control, and serving the people. In an article by the Daily Signal, it outlines reasons why the connection between the CPA and the Chinese Communist Party makes it clear that the CPA works with China's communist government, pushes its agenda here in the U.S. But since when does the CCP really care about Black lives and even human rights for that matter? An article by CTGN highlights the hypocritical condemnation of the U.S. by the Chinese government, reporting that the Chinese foreign minister said that Black lives matter and their human rights should be guaranteed, adding that after spokesperson Chao Lijian told reporters that we hope that the U.S. government would take all necessary measures to deal with the violent law enforcement of police so as to protect and safeguard the legitimate interests of racial minorities. I'm sorry, but China isn't that the country currently ruled by the authoritarian government that has been persecuting Christians, putting genocide to the Muslim Uyghurs, and is overtaking Hong Kong right now? And since when does China's government care about Black people? They literally toss them out onto the street by landlords, hotel managers, and local officials, as reported by Foreign Policy, for absolutely no reason at the beginning of the pandemic, where the virus was birthed. Can you imagine? So what's the deal here? Is it simply a coincidence that the Marxist co-founder of Black Lives Matter movement is being sponsored to help rally up Black voters in America for the upcoming election by an organization that's loyal to the CCP? Or is everything all good as long as it's painted under the expression Black Lives Matter? Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. Have you heard of these names? Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig? Every Canadian should, but sadly, many have not. The two Canadian Michaels have been unlawfully imprisoned and have been suffering in a dark cell in China since December 2018. Rebel News has hired a lawyer to help bring our two Michaels back home. And if you want to fight that fight with us, please head to freethetwomichaels.com. We appreciate your support.